Hello everyone, welcome back to your short break. Let's wait another minute or two before we get started. We see that all the participants are coming in and joining, and the numbers going up. It's awesome. Because you know what? The next session that we are about to introduce, or at least I'm about to introduce, will be awesome and something that I think everybody in, especially on the private sector, public sector, will be interested in knowing this particular topics. Trust me, you guys will learn a lot. Just another minute, 30 seconds. Right, 15 seconds. I have a countdown. It's like New Year's Eve. Very exciting. All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, everybody, welcome back to your short break. And thank you so much again for joining the Gala event. I'm hoping that everyone had a wonderful session in the last 3 sessions. You know, those are mind-blowing, and you know, I gotta say, right, even I myself in this industry for many years, I'm still learning so much for individual and respected speakers. It was breathtaking material and professional opinions that they brought to you guys. Thank you so much. So quick note before I get started, again, everybody's muted and videos off. Any question in regard to Zoom, Gala members is there for you and will help you and assist you. And again, any question that you may have during the presentation or to a particular topics, go to your Q&A panel on the control panel and type in your questions. I will also post in some questions during the presentation because it related to certain topics that I lose and Paula, which I'll be presenting shortly. I'll be asking you guys to answer those so that they can give in their feedback as well. All right, let's get started, guys. I'm James. I'll be your next moderator for this session. I'm motivated to welcome our next topic and speakers, Paula Hunter and Luz Pineda, which they'll be presenting the 3 R's in the localization, software localizations, how to scale without reinventing the wheel. Here's a quick bio for this two awesome speakers. Paula is a localization professional with over 20 years of experience in helping company to grow and succeed globally by building out successful localization program. Her experience in managing localization projects extend across all software, technical documentation, training, global marketing, and customer support. She currently leads the localization and technical documentation team at Avigilon and inspired by finding opportunity to solve problems through innovation and collaboration effort. Luz is a localization professional, currently working as a technical project manager at Avigilon, and after 10 plus years in different software testing roles, she finally reverted to her real passion, which is focusing on the localization management. And this journey started 6 years ago. The experience gained over time in this IT has helped her to realize the importance and the need for localization quality across all languages. Luz has worked within the various of software applications such as website, a desktop, a web-based application, and mobile application. Paula and Luz, I welcome you. Please, you have the control now. Thank you so much.
Thanks, James. And good morning, everyone. My name is Paula Hunter, and I'm super excited to be here together with my amazing colleague, Luz Pineda. Thank you so much for joining us today. Over the next hour, we will share some of the key components we have discovered that have contributed to the evolution of both our localization program as a whole, and then specifically that of our software localization processes.
Hold on, could you share your slide, please?
Oh, sorry.
Awesome, I can see it now. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Over the next hour, we will share some of the key components we have discovered that have contributed to the evolution of both our localization program as a whole, and then specifically that of our software localization processes. That said, just because we're the ones behind these slides today does not mean we aren't interested in learning from you as well. This is my favorite part. So please to help facilitate our virtual discussion, James will be posting some questions to the Zoom chat, as he mentioned at the beginning of select slides. And so please do share your thoughts and experiences at any point along the way so that we can keep this conversation going during the final Q&A. But first, to provide a bit of context about the type of content we are working with, here's a high-level overview of who we are and what we do here at Avigilon. Avigilon delivers innovative products and solutions that help keep people and communities safe. Our product portfolio has grown significantly over the last several years and can be grouped into the following main categories: high-definition cameras, software products such as video management, access control, cloud services, and mobile applications. We also provide network video recorders or servers, as well as reselling third-party hardware and accessories. More recently, Avigilon has integrated A&I analytics into the majority of our products. Nearly 2 years ago, we were acquired by Motorola Solutions, but our focus has remained with video security and analytics. At Avigilon, the localization team supports the entire organization. We work most closely with software development, technical documentation, marketing, and select areas of training and customer experience. But we also support requests from and work together with shipping and manufacturing, finance, and the legal team. This discussion will focus first on the creation of the localization program, and then Luz will dive deeper into the tips and tricks we've learned as we continue to evolve our software localization processes. We'll have 15 minutes for a final Q&A, so please do submit your comments, questions, and experiences throughout this presentation for discussion at the end. The first building block we will discuss is the 3 Ps. When I first looked up the 3 Ps, I discovered all sorts of variations within different industries, but in this case, we define them as product, people, and process. Although I'll admit I saw passion referenced in some of my research, and we certainly don't lack for any of that, as you'll probably note throughout our discussion. But I'd already submitted my proposal to Gala, so we stuck with these 3. The general idea behind this concept is this: focusing on these key elements creates organizational efficiencies and enables companies to grow and scale. I came across an article in Forbes magazine that told the story of a very successful startup company called Gainsight. The article was called People, Process, Product: How to Emphasize Each for Rapid Growth. It went on to talk about Gainsight's growth of 12,000% in 2016, making it North America's 7th fastest growing tech company that year. It concluded with the following quote: "Perfect your product, nurture your people, and scale your processes." In my opinion, this can really apply to any business, industry, or service, and localization programs are no exception. We will share with you how we apply this principle and would love to hear about similar or different experiences within your organizations. Next, the next component is reduce, reuse, recycle. This is another concept familiar to us all, and interestingly, also a global one. In our discussion, we will share how this concept can be applied to software localization specifically, fitting within the process circle, which we will elaborate more on later. The final concept I'd like to introduce is the constraints triangle. This may also be familiar to many of you, as it's often used in the context of project management principles. The idea behind the constraints triangle is that you can only pick 2. Fast and good will be expensive. Fast and cheap will be low quality. Good and cheap will take a longer time. I'm confident that every localizer in this group right now, if I could see your cameras, is nodding with experience and explaining the reasons behind this to the localization newbie stakeholder or executives who often want all 3, which falls into a category all its own: in your dreams. Now that we've introduced these foundational components, we will look more closely at how they apply to both the Avigilon localization program and the software localization process. Let's now circle back to the 3 Ps. A long time ago, in a Canadian city along the Pacific Northwest, a Vancouver-based entrepreneur identified a huge market need for video security systems that enabled high-resolution cameras to deliver high-quality image to an easy-to-use video management system software. That's a mouthful, I know. I'll elaborate. Many companies at the time had great cameras and great software, but struggled to maintain the high-quality end-to-end. Avigilon solved that problem, and did so with extremely low bandwidth requirements. The solution was one of the first of its kind, And this is the first pre, product. The security industry, as with many industries, including localization, is very tight-knit, as we all know, and the word got out globally. The company responded to this by hiring salespeople all over the world. Business strategy, get the feet on the street, or in other words, the second P, people. Avigilon had a great product and then focused on hiring people to get the message out. Within a relatively short period of time, Avigilon was shipping products all over the world. In fact, by the time I joined in 2013, they were shipping to, I believe, over 60 countries. Not long after came the inevitable, the need to localize. Having sales presence around the world only goes so far. Knowledge of English tends to be lower amongst the users of our video security systems, and so the demand to provide software and manuals in local language grew quickly. In order to continue growing, they needed to localize. To do this, you need to apply the third P, process. But in this fast-paced environment, there was no time to slow down and figure out the best process. This resulted in content authors and global sales teams working together to get translated products and documentation out the door as quickly as possible. This wasn't unique to Avigilon. In fact, I'd hazard to guess that this is exactly how some of you were probably introduced to localization. You may have been a marketeer who suddenly was asked to provide your collateral materials in Spanish and Portuguese to support a new Latin American campaign, or a tester or developer or tech writer who was asked to get product software and manuals localized into French for a Canadian project. I know we're pretty high maintenance up here. Or a business owner with big global dreams. Sorry about that. However, this way of working has several negative implications. The most obvious to me is that this process, or lack thereof, takes content authors away from their regular work, not to mention the inefficiencies resulting from context switching and duplication of efforts, and the inflated costs associated. It can feel a little like this image of content authors all riding this brand new localization roller coaster, trying to keep all the balls or orange squares up in the air. In 2013, I was hired as a consultant to assess the existing globalization activities within the organization. I first focused on getting to know the three Ps. Product. What did it do? How was it used? What was the future vision? People. Who were the content authors? Who sent translation files? Who did the translations? Who managed the localized website? Who paid for the costs, if any? Who determined the priority languages and regions, and how? So many people to meet and chat with. And processes. How did localization fit into the development cycles, if at all? How did the source files get translated and built or published to the website? How were translation projects managed? Really what I wanted to find out was this. What were the main pain points and where were the opportunities to address them? What was working? What wasn't working? What I didn't realize at the time was that these folks were all well on their way to becoming the localization champions within their departments. At the end of the assessment, my final report focused on the following 5 actions. These were to, 1, centralize all localization activities and tools. This allowed content authors to focus on their area of expertise. It enabled better translation leverage and overall quality and consistency. It improved communications by having a single point of contact between the vendor and the stakeholders. One voice, one set of instructions, resulting in better quality deliverables and a faster turnaround time. 2, select a new vendor as a partner or an extension of the team. As I began to centralize the localization activities with the existing vendor, I started to realize that this wasn't quite the right fit anymore. We needed a vendor who could not only provide the necessary services, but also act as a consultant, who I could lean on for expertise in areas where my experience was limited or even non-existent. For any of you who attended LocWorld 2014 in Vancouver, I presented on the RFP process for selecting a vendor, which may be online still somewhere, and I'd be happy to revisit if anyone wanted to chat about that later. 3, educate and evangelize. We hear this a lot in localization. It's important. Having already met with all the key stakeholders and listening to their pain points, it allowed me to learn more about the nature of the different types of content. And with the freedom to return to their regular day jobs and hand off these localization tasks, they were keen to learn and eager to please. Explaining to content authors how they directly benefit by creating localization-friendly content and code is key to getting their attention. In this case, the benefits for them were kept the localization manager happy to take on these tasks, But most importantly, it reduced the frequency of asking them to fix source files mid-translation or post-delivery, saving them time and effort. Make it easy for them to say yes is the secret sauce to leading by influence, I found. Make it a win-win. And 4, move from reactive to strategic decisions. When I asked about how languages were prioritized, it sounded fairly ad hoc. Again, not totally unique. I think a lot of companies start with localization in this way. It was either global sales coming up against RFPs that required local language support, or decision makers who had recently come back from an industry event where suddenly Polish simply had to happen, for example, or shipments getting stuck in customs because the inbox documentation wasn't in local language. With localization support already in place, there was opportunity to put more strategy behind the process. Collecting metrics would enable us to make more data-driven decisions around language and asset prioritization. Metrics such as global revenue by region and product, resulting leads or sales for specific global marketing campaigns, number of localized website visits, number of localized document downloads, such as manuals, data sheets, or flyers and brochures, and sales presence. How big are the teams in each region, and what are their growth plans, and so on. Learning where to go, who to ask, and how to use the tools, and in some cases, even just gaining access or admin rights, can be challenging. This is another area where your solid relationships with key stakeholders will greatly benefit your overall localization program. And finally, bringing select resources and tasks in-house. As mentioned in action number 2, we moved to a vendor who could act more as an extension of the team in order to effectively support the entire organization. As the program continued to evolve, opportunities became more apparent where we could benefit by bringing some of these services and expertise in-house, which brings me to my next slide. The team. I am beyond excited to introduce this dream team to everybody and how we got here. After about a year of working together with our new vendor and internal stakeholders to achieve the goals outlined in the previous slide, it was time to reassess where we were at and the new areas of opportunity. As the company continued to grow, so did the product portfolio. And we started to notice areas where we could add more efficiencies, but I simply didn't have the bandwidth to dig in deeper. And so just over a year later, we were blessed to have Luz Pineda join the team as our technical project manager, who will speak more on these improvements in the latter half of the presentation. I won't steal her thunder on this topic, but suffice to say, she's an absolute rock star in building relationships, envisioning better ways of working, and executing on them. While Luz ran with product development localization, I was able to focus more on our marketing activities and dig into possible areas of opportunity. The first thing I noticed was that 45% of our marketing related spend was on DTP, or desktop publishing. As everyone in this virtual room I'm sure is aware, when you replace English with another language, there's some level of reformatting that is required, which at the time was provided by the vendor. If we hired a localization desktop publisher, not only would we save on these costs, but it would also enable us to look at further regionalizing these marketing materials in a way that only an internal employee with subject matter expertise could really effectively deliver. And so we posted the role looking for a graphic design background with experience in localization or an insatiable enthusiasm to learn. Eduardo had both. Although he was hired primarily for his design skills and love of languages, his role quickly evolved into an effective localization project lead for all marketing activities. He was quick to learn about localization principles, managing complex projects, and how the marketing processes worked. Eduardo had become the marketing equivalent to a localized engineer in that he is embedded within that team to keep on top of what they need, what they're doing, and how they're doing it. We work together to continually refine those processes and adapt quickly, as marketing tends to shift their activities, tools, and priorities very quickly. Now, back to software development. At this point, Luz had successfully integrated both herself and localization into the software development processes, but the teams and product portfolio continued to grow. And so we needed to adapt in order to continue effectively supporting the team and the company. Rather than solve this challenge by hiring another technical project manager, as much as I would love to clone Luz, it wasn't possible. So we dug deeper into the most time-consuming tasks and realized there was opportunity for automation. But we weren't developers, and our internal dev teams had no bandwidth to support our vision. I knew Avigilon Engineering had a co-op or internship program, and so we sat down together and wrote up what a localization developer co-op position could do for our team and the organization. The proposal was approved, and the following year, nearly 4 years ago now, we hired our very first computing science co-op student. I'm a huge advocate for these programs, partly because this was how I fell into the localization industry through my first co-op job. The benefits we have found are twofold. One, their fresh perspective and technical abilities enable them to help identify opportunities to automate, and then they work together closely with the software development teams to create the scripts to do so. And second, we love to think of this also as giving back to the computing science community, where we are educating one developer at a time on localization best practices. Localization still isn't a part of the regular computing science curriculum, and so we feel really good about sending these students back to school or into the workforce to continue educating and evangelizing. They primarily work on test automation scripts, as Luz will talk about later. But in one case, we had a student focus on enabling bidirectional support for one of our key software products. We had watched this Arabic requirement get pushed from release to release, and so decided to dedicate our next co-op to help complete this task. And he did, with flying colors. These students truly make such a huge impact to our team and the organization. Which brings me to our final team member, who I am thrilled to welcome on board as of 2 weeks ago. I had to update my slides. Jen was one of our Rockstar co-op students and is now finishing up her comp sci degree and has joined our team full-time. She will continue taking our automation to the next level, and we look forward to sharing with you all where we're at with this at Gala 2021. Hint, hint. So this is our immediate internal team. I'd also like to acknowledge the global sales teams, our wonderful ICRs, who contribute their regional subject matter expertise by reviewing key terms and select translation projects. They also provide us with valuable ad hoc feedback directly from the field. Our vendor model has also evolved over time. We began with a single vendor who added tremendous value to centralize and create a vision for our localization program. I will be forever grateful for that first project manager who I learned so much from and was so enthusiastic and committed to creating something great for Avigilon. Over time, and with changes to some of our authoring tools, we started to realize that certain types of content might work more efficiently and effectively with different tools and vendor expertise. And so we shifted marketing content to a vendor who specialized in transcreation, and tech docs to a vendor who had the tools and expertise to improve the tech doc localization process. This is another aspect I really enjoy about our community, is how the multi-vendor model really works. Both client side and vendor side realize we all need to work together to continue evolving our industry. It's a beautiful thing. I'd like to pause here now to learn about your own experience in building localization teams and processes within your organization, and answer any burning questions you may have had along the way. We can take 3 to 5 minutes here to do so.
All right, thank you so much, Paula, for your introduction to the localization process. There are a couple of questions that are burning in people's minds, so I would like to, speak those out. What's the difference between reuse and recycle?
Luz will cover this in great detail with her in the second half, so I'm not going to steal that from her.
And the second question is that, do you have to demonstrate how localization makes other departments successful in achieving their goal? How do you do that?
Yeah, again, working with the stakeholders, I lean on the global sales teams quite a bit. They're the ones who can, translate our activities into dollar value. So I often, if we're localizing something new, I will ask them, can you please send me, the leads that you gain from that, or the sales that you gain from that. And that helps that's from the sales point of view. And I guess it depends on the stakeholder, sitting down with them and really learning about what their goals and vision are. I mean, with marketing, they have campaigns in other countries, and we can enable them to make sure that the messaging is communicated as effectively as it's being done in English.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer the question?
Yep, I think so. Another question I have is, or at least the audience has, is that how do you address, the 3 Rs in Agile methodology?
Sorry, can you say that again?
How do you address the 3 Rs in the Agile methodologies?
Again, Luz is going to talk about that in the next half.
Great, can't wait until the next.
I know, these are great segues. I love it.
The last question is that how were you able to get a budget for all this new headcounts? Interesting.
Yes, that is very interesting. Well, as I mentioned, having a manager who understands the importance of localization, I have been so blessed with that. But really, I think the key to convincing for the headcount is to show how much that work will be taken off the plates of internals. So if you have developers who are, doing work outside of, internationalizing best practices, then you can demonstrate how you're taking that off the plates to enable them to focus, to drive the roadmap, the product portfolio further, making it easy for them to say yes. Yeah, with the co-op program, that was good because we were able to demonstrate that that would enable us to automate without using development resources. And also co-op students are cheaper than full-time students. So, I mean, budget holders, you need to speak dollar value, right? So all of your benefits that you see as a localizer that they may not understand, really try to find how that can translate into dollar value, or taking, like I said, taking work off of plates of people that need to focus on their job at the time.
I see. And based on that answer, do you guys use your measurements such as, for example, you can explain to your executive that, outside of English market, we are getting this amount of money because we are localizing this money into dollar amounts. Would that convince the executive to hire more FTE and contractors?
You have to show the benefit of what that is. Went through an exercise of looking at if we were to move all of our outsourced activities in-house, what would that team look like and what would that cost? Because localization budgets are often, one of the larger budgets in an organization. I know I have the largest, we sit within product management, and I have the biggest budget because we outsource, right? We need to through a vendor. And so, the big boss came down and asked, well, why are we spending all this money? Why are we spending so much with a vendor? And so, again, we went through the exercise. This is how much it would cost headcount wise if we brought all of that in-house. So I guess I'm answering that question on the flip side. Why are we spending so much with a vendor? So just kind of mapping that out and showing what the costs and benefits and time required looks like. And it's going to be different for every company. I don't think there's any one localization team or program alike. Everyone, is on this spectrum of outsourcing and in-house. And I just find that so fascinating, which is why, these are excellent questions. But I'd love to also learn how other people approach this as well.
I see. It's about the balance of the equation, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's all about balance and what works for everybody.
And the last question that I have is, how many languages and product and you guys are handling, and do you use single LSP for all the needs you need for the localization team?
First question, we localize in up to 23 languages for our software products. Our technical documentation is up to 9 or 10, depending. Sometimes we have one-off cases where we add certain languages. And then within marketing, it ranges between 3 and 20 languages, depending on the regional needs. Sometimes there'll be a regional trade show that needs banners in a particular language. So to answer to some, so between 3 and 23 is what we're working with.
I see. And is it a single LSP or multi-LSP models?
No, we use 3. Actually, we use 2 because 2 of them actually merged. So it used to be 3, and now it's very convenient for us that they merged. So we use different vendors for the different content types. So we use one for software UI and localization testing. We use one for marketing because they specialize in transcreation. And then we use another one for our tech docs because they specialize in the tools that we use. and it worked out. It made our process a lot more efficient.
Thank you. And just to let you know that I posed a question about your slide in regards to the constraint triangles. And a couple of feedback that I got is that time constraints tend to be very limited because the focus here is about high quality and reduced costs until the software is about to release or the deadline. So everybody's thinking that the time constraint is very limited, and that's something that nobody has control over. Only the product has control that I will release this by a certain day. It doesn't matter if my content is basically created 2 days before. Time constraint is very, very limited and something that we have no control. But in your point of view, how do you control the time in your organization?
So this will actually be answered in Luz's presentation when we talk about the reduce, reuse, recycle, and looking at it from the point of view of not how can we turn around something in 2 days, but how can we get more than 2 days to turn it around? So looking at it farther upstream, so that way. And interestingly enough, when I was looking at the constraints triangle, I saw some that had scope in there as well. So there were 4 points. I think scope was in the middle. And in some cases, when you just simply can't work around it, and I know there are hard deadlines, like with marketing campaigns and things like that, and release schedules, but sometimes you can reprioritize. Like, is it absolutely necessary that our localized documentation go out with the release? Is there wiggle room, to release it a little bit later? So, taking a bigger step back and looking at, is this really necessary? Is there anywhere in the bigger picture that we can find a little bit of flexibility on when this is delivered? Or looking at your processes. If you have your processes set up where some steps can be skipped, then that comes down to the quality. If you skip your review, so, taking that bigger picture, step back, and having those broader conversations.
Okay. All right, which I think time for the next presenter, Luz. So hopefully that they will address, I think, your other question that in regards to the 3Ps and 3R, and Luz can definitely discuss that as well.
Absolutely. So with that, I want to thank you all for all those amazing questions. That is my favorite part. But again, I'm looking forward to hearing about your experiences as well. I'm going to be available in the Gala Network sessions to answer any additional questions you might have or troubleshoot any challenges that you may be facing. I can't promise I'll have the right answer, but I love to talk lock. And with that, I will pass the laptop mic over to Luz to share with you the evolution of our software localization process. Take it away, Luz.
Awesome.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you, James. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. On the second part of the presentation, we're going to focus on the concepts of reusing and recycling, and I'm going to answer that question you posted earlier. We'll talk about how we apply such concepts to existing processes, resources, and expertise. We'll talk about how by doing so, we were able to reduce time and cost with minimum impact on quality. Although I focus on software localization, I'm sure some of these ideas and experiences can be easily applied to other types of content. Whether you are starting a new localization project from scratch or working on an existing project, I really hope you find these lessons we learned useful somehow. With that, let's get started. Okay, so very important. Before you decide what can be reused, recycle, and reduce, you need to understand the current workflows and people involved in the project. Let's see how the 3 Ps discussed earlier relate to the initial analysis. Let's start with people, my favorite, especially our development teams. Get to know your development teams. How are they organized? You'll get most of the UI changes from teams working on the front end. Who are the team leaders? Wherever possible, identify potential localization champions. They will happily embrace software localization best practices, and most important, they will be eager to spread the word to other team members. Make the QA or testing team your best friend. They are the super users of the software you'll be responsible for localizing, and they will be your ally in preserving quality across all the locales supported by your software. The next one is products. In our case, software products. Get to know the software. How many languages do they support? What are those languages? Learn how the software works, even at a very high level. You don't have to be an expert. If you're dealing with, say, standalone applications, download some builds, install them, play with them. Or, as your very good friends from the testing team, access to their testing environments. If you want, you could take this one step further and learn how the localization has been implemented. In other words, are the developers using standard libraries to internationalize the software, or they have to create a customized solution? All these questions, asking these questions, are going to be important later on. Last but not least, processes, in this case, development cycles. It is important to know about them. The release cadence dictates the pace of the localization process itself. Which are the main milestones? Are these teams following some sort of agile mode? Who and how the scope is decided in each release? This information is useful when planning and executing your localization cycles. To summarize, do not make any changes until you fully understand your products, the people and process involved. So what were the findings after this initial analysis? So when I joined the team, software products were already localized. The strings had been externalized into resource files, and most engineers were familiar with concepts such as internationalization and localization. There was already a well-defined localization process in place. However, there are some areas we needed to take a second look. The first one was the way that we were exchanging resource files with the engineering team. Unfortunately, exchanging files via email or folders in the network is inefficient and error-prone. Files can go out of date easily, and sometimes you get these files very late in the process. Does this sound familiar to you? Do let us know. We'll come back to this in the QA session. The second part was existing communication on changes to a scope and a schedule needed definitely to be improved. Once more, using emails was not an effective way to communicate this information. People may even just forget to include the localization team in the distribution list, and just like that, you are out of the loop. If you find yourself in a similar situation, please let us know about your challenges. Then the next one, this one is a big one. Feedback on the UI changes or UI strings was delivered during the UI design phase. But as probably some of you know, quite often, design changes occur at the implementation change. We added an extra step once all the UI updates were implemented in the software and as a final review, but this also remained a challenge. This review happened often late in the cycle. So when the window for changes had already closed. It was necessary to identify the optimum time to provide feedback to allow development to handle changes. Now it's your turn. How do you provide feedback to developers and other stakeholders on UI changes? Do you actually have the opportunity to do so? If so, chat is open for you to share. To sum up, even when there is a localization process in place, take the time to identify areas of opportunity. Ask yourself which parts or steps of the current process can be changed or improved to further streamline the localization process. And with that one, we start with reuse. Let's take a closer look at this concept. What resources can be reused to add improvements to your own localization process? Reuse of the source control tools. When you think about it, the localization team is not the only one adding changes that need to be implemented in the software. Developers are constantly adding updates to their code. They rely on a version control tool, so they don't have to worry about identifying possible conflicts or updating the wrong version of a particular file. So we figured out that the same version control tool could be used to extract these resource files updated ourselves and to deliver the translations as well. We requested access to their repositories to get the latest resource file to be sent out for translation, and using the same tool, once the translations were delivered, we use it to merge them into the corresponding branch, which is usually the master branch in the case of localization, which is lucky. You don't have to be trying to guess what branch you need to work on. The same version control tool also notifies people when these updates are ready for approval. So communication is also taken care at the same time. Next, reuse of communication channels. To keep up to date with changes in the schedule and scope, it was identified which meetings would be the best for the localization team to attend. That way, we would learn immediately about these changes as they happen. These are some examples, and you may call them differently. Weekly status meetings. They're convenient because it is in these meetings when people discuss about changes in the schedule and changes in the scope, and you have all the key stakeholders in the project. They are also the perfect target audience to communicate localization timelines and set expectations. The next one, Scrums. I know they happen daily, and if you are working with more than one development team, it might get a little bit overwhelming. But when you think about it, these meetings are short, to the point, and you get a very good sense on the progress on a particular release. It is your turn now. How do you communicate localization timelines to your internal teams? Please share. The next one, Tech Talks or Launch and Learn events. They are a great way to learn about other teams, but also the perfect opportunity to teach and evangelize our teams about localization best practices. As new engineers join your organization, it seems worthwhile to have at least one session a year dedicated only to software localization best practices. Make them fun, keep them fresh and interactive so everybody wants to attend. The next one, reuse of development tools or project management tools in general. Some examples, collaboration tools. Most collaboration tools come in some sort of a wiki. They offer a place where everybody can find information to help them in their daily tasks. So rather than keeping documentation about your processes here and there in the network, we reuse the same collaboration tool to publish everything localization related. Using this tool is very useful when it comes to geographically dispersed teams. You can answer their questions at a different time zone by simply sharing a link so they will have access to detailed information. Over to you, audience. We would love to hear how you handle communication with other teams. Please share. Reuse of bug reporting and tracking tools. Currently, our testing scope is limited only to linguistic testing, and we work with an external team. So the bugs found during this test execution are split into two main categories. One, linguistic issues, which our translation vendor takes care of them. And the second one, layout or functional issues that need to be fixed by our own internal engineers. Layout and functional issues were previously communicated using spreadsheets, I know. The QA team had to import these issues into our bug tracking tool so we could triage them and assign them to the correct development team. This approach, although it worked, had its own challenges. By the time the errors were triaged, the window to fix them within the same release had closed. Localization issues therefore ended up in the error backlog. And we all know the error backlog is where localization issues go and die. Quite often, localization issues are considered low priority, so it might take more than one release to fix them. The solution was to reuse our own internal error tracker tool. The external test team was given access to only one project dedicated exclusively to localization errors. So that way they would be able to log directly layout and functional issues. Although it sounds straightforward, and you may be wondering why you didn't do it in the first place, well, it's not that simple. Due to security concerns raised by our IT department, we have to create a special user IDs to restrict visibility on issues logged by other internal teams. In other words, nobody in the localization, the linguistic testing team has access to errors logged by anybody else in the company. It's time for you to share again. Are you working with an external testing team? If so, how do you communicate localization or layout issues to your own engineers? Lines are open, or chat is open. Okay, so last one is one of my very favorites. The reuse of the code review process. We mentioned that the previous UI stream review occurred rather late in the development cycle. In some cases, we were making changes to UI strings that had already been translated. This was neither cost effective nor time efficient, definitely. So observing how the development team provides feedback on their code changes enabled the localization team to reuse the same tool and process. This process looks something like this. Before a developer is ready, before a developer can merge code changes into the master brand, she or he had to create something we call a pull request. This pull request then is open for other developers to provide feedback on the code changes. And it looks something like this. We determined that we could reuse the same tool and process to provide feedback on changes in the UI and strings. At the end of the day, resource files are just another file in the repository. So now both localization and technical writing teams are now included in these pull requests whenever changes in the UI or resource files happen. The information that you can get out of a pull request looks like this. You know the name of the developer that is making the change, the description and the reason for the change. Most important, we get screenshots for context. They are fantastic for context, highlighting the strings that are being either added or changed. When you think about it, you can just take this information, put it as part of your translation request package, and voila, you have enough context for the translators to work their magic. Now that feedback is coming from localization on a basically real-time basis, developers are able to even test on the spot for potential layout issues. This is a way more effective approach. They are waiting to make changes anyways, so they don't mind. And let me just say that we have come a long way from the time when we used to fix layout issues by shortening translations. I've seen that in other projects so many times. So thanks to this step, we can avoid them altogether. And let's move. One last thing. Sometimes a developer might forget to include you. So what development teams are doing right now, they are automating this step in the pipeline. So whenever there is a change in the resource files, we get added automatically as approvers. So back to the audience. Do you actually have the chance to provide UI stream feedback on a timely manner? If you find a solution, we would love to hear about this solution. So please share. Let's move to the next one. Recycle. Okay, so before we move to this topic, let's answer the question somebody posted earlier. In this context, and basically any context, reusing means we're simply taking a resource and use it as it is for the same purpose it was created, but we just extended the use of that resource to localization purposes. Recycling, on the other hand, you need to take a resource, you have to make changes here and there, and adapt it to your own needs. As you will see, the resources that we recycle, all of them have to do with testing. This is when the statement about making the QA team your best friend will make more sense. So let's start with testing assets. Even if your if the scope of the testing that you are responsible for is limited to linguistic testing, you still need test cases. So instead of creating test cases from scratch, we just use a subset of the test cases already created by the QA team. Let's keep in mind that even if we have access to these test cases, we still need to make copies and adapt them to be used for linguistic purposes. And let me show you an example as well. So this is a real life example. Initially, this test case was created to test the navigation in an application we call ACM, Access Control Management. So we made a copy and moved it into the localization project. And while the preconditions and steps remain the same, as you can see, the expected results needed to be changed slightly. And this is to keep the focus of the tester on verifying the language quality. The rest of the verification points are mostly functional. So it's not necessarily our scope. If anybody in the audience is doing something similar, we would like to hear about it. Or if not, how do you manage a scope when it comes to testing? That would be another interesting question.
Hi, Luz. Sorry, you have about 9 minutes left.
Yes.
I should know that. Thank you, including
Yes.
Q&A. Thank you.
No problem. Let's move on to testing environments. Again, in the early days, we needed to send a build, and somebody on the external team side had to recreate a working testing environment, which was very expensive and time-consuming. Then the tester would have to manually execute these test cases. Again, expensive and time-consuming. As the complexity of the new features increased, so it did the complexity of the testing environment. This is when we decided to recycle the testing environments. They are already there. They are being maintained by experts. They are testing the exact same features that we have to test, but we still need to make changes to these environments to make them work in other languages. Let's move to test automation. Recycling testing environments does not make much sense unless you find a way to automate the testing. For as much as we love them, we cannot really bring our external linguistic testing team into the building so they can use these environments. So you need to automate that. So once again, instead of buying a specific tool that create scripts for the purposes of testing, we simply use the testing frameworks created in-house. We have the expertise, and in some cases, they have scripts that deal with UI navigation. You cannot use them as they are. You need to make copies, and you need to add the functionality that enable these scripts to take screenshots that can be used for linguistic testing purposes. Now, the next one. And the last one. So we're on time. By now, we know that the strings in the repository have been reviewed. We know when the milestones will happen. And most important, we don't need to wait for somebody to send us the files so we can send them for translation. We just go into the repository and grab them ourselves. And thanks to the information in the pull request, we have more context and screenshots to add in the translation package. So just by doing that, we eliminate the time spent in answering questions for translators. Once we get the translations back, we can deliver directly into the repositories, so we know exactly when to expect the localized builds. This has reduced the turnaround time for localization delivery significantly. One of my favorites, we have reduced the number of localization bugs. And hopefully by now, this seems straightforward. So we have been able to reduce the number of layered issues thanks to the feedback provided via the pull request. And also the number of linguistic issues has decreased thanks to the additional context and information that we pass on to the translators. And the last one, who doesn't love reducing time and cost, even just for linguistic testing? By reusing the testing environments and automating taking screenshots to be used for translation, we have cut easily the time and the cost for linguistic testing purposes for the very least between 40 to 45%. But we're not done yet. As a team, we have not reached the end of the continuous improvement yet. Now, we went from having to scan 4 repositories to almost 11. And just to give you an idea, one of those repositories, we need to scan at least 10 subdirectories looking for resource files. So this is how it looks, a translation request workflow. All the arrows that you see in yellow right now, they remain largely manual. So we need to find a way to automate them. We have a last step, which is when we get the delivery from the LSP and put it in directly into the Git repositories. That one, we still need to find some way to semi-automate it. We cannot fully automate it because remember, nothing goes into the repositories unless somebody takes a look at it first. Another area we are hoping to continue benefiting by expanding the automation scope is testing. We need to bring more of our products to be tested under the automation testing umbrella. And we're exploring some other areas like linguistic error verification that we can also automate to save, again, time and effort and definitely cost. To that effect, that's why Jane joined our team. She's going to take us to the next level, and stay tuned because the next presentation could be about what happened next. With that, I finish my presentation. Thank you so much for listening, and we move to the QA and discussion session.
Thank you so much, Paula and Luz, for the awesome presentation. The material is inspiring, so thank you so much for that. There are actually lots of questions, and hopefully that we have 3 minutes to address them all. The first question is, how do you make sure the documents that you want to translate, and especially that you have three suppliers, how do you make sure that the document translation is consistent throughout, the different suppliers that you have managed so far?
Well, the vendors are split by content type. So, so the consistency is maintained. Really, the only consistency we need across them is terminology. So we use a glossary, and that glossary is imported into the different translation memory systems. The glossary is definitely something that we continually aim to improve this process. We're a little slow to add them, but one of the benefits of working embedded with these teams and working upstream is that we are aware of these terms before translation is required. So we have room for improvement in that regard, but that's how we maintain quality consistency across the 3 different vendors. And we also have the same reviewers.
Great, thank you so much. And I believe that Luz has explained the difference between recycle and reuse. Another question is about, because we all use multi-vendor approach, sending different type of material. How do you, and I know that you kind of mentioned that from a different vendor's perspective, but then let's say if you have a marketing versus a legal versus a tech doc, how do you make sure that the terminology itself is very consistent?
Really, the glossary is really what we use.
I see. Okay, so glossary and style guide, that would definitely help to align in the consistency of the term translation.
Yeah.
And then I actually would like Daniel, because Daniel asked a very good question about single executive or execution file versus a multi-execution file to support the language, and especially that the question relate to, and how do we compile the program or write the translation in the execution file? And I believe that Daniel is on mute. So Daniel, could you speak more about this?
Hi, my name is Daniel. I work for 2020 Technology. What we do it is by default, we write directly in the exe without we compile it. The advantage is for us is we have 10 version of the software for 10 different languages. And I just want to know how you proceed. The advantage for us is for testing, we test very more the English version than the translated, because the translated, we have only the user interface to test. And when we have a bug report, the advantage is we retest in the English. If we can't reproduce in the English, it's more the development team will take care. When it's in translation only, we know it could be the translation create the bugs. Okay, for example, double bytes yes is not for Y for yes. Double byte character is, we can, if you have a bug like yes is test for one character, it will not work. What you do it for your software, do you write directly in the exe, or you recompile each language, or you have a database with all language when you release?
So basically, for software localization, we actually use the same code source for all the languages. The way that we handle the localization is by using dictionaries. So if you take a look at the source code in our products, you will never see a string that has been hard-coded. You will see a string IDs. So since we have decoupled the languages from the source code, as long as the source code works, we can have some level of confidence that is going to work across all the languages. Sometimes we find functional errors for the specific languages, and those are the ones that our development teams have to fix.
But when do you have one exe and a database when you want to switch to Chinese, French, English? Do you have one version for each, or you have one exe and you change language in the menu?
You change languages in the menu.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I know that we ran out of time, and actually, you know what? This is a good segue to the networking session. We actually have a networking session now until 12:30 PST, Pacific Standard Time Zone. So Daniel and Paula, Luz, I think this is a great time to network about the opportunity that you guys can have. And I just want to say thank you so much, everybody. Right now it's a lunch break. We all need lunch,
Thank you,
right?
James.
Yes,
Thank you, everyone.
1 hour lunch break, and then be back at the clock at 12:30 Pacific Standard Time Zone. Thank you so much. And I'll see you guys at the networking, at the Remos app. Thank you.
Thanks so much, James. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.